right, welcome everyone. I'm Gina Lago-Marcino. I'm CEO of Results for Development, and I am really delighted to invite you, to welcome you all here today on behalf of R4D and also our co-host, which is the Global Health Council. So it's so nice to see folks here in person today. I'm also aware that we have over 900 people that actually registered for this webinar online, and I see the numbers starting to climb. So there's a great interest in this topic that we're going to be discussing today. Really great to see you all. So we're here today to discuss a recently released consensus study from the Uganda National Academies of Science, which is titled Enacting an Ethic of Care and Responsibility in Global Health Partnerships. So I was very honored a few years ago to be invited to co-chair the working group of this consensus study alongside Dorian, who you're going to meet in a moment. And our role was to facilitate consensus among a very diverse group of working group partners around the world on this topic of equity in global health partnerships. So the report calls for change in the way we all conduct ourselves within global health partnerships. So just as we begin this session, I would love to see a show of hands. Can you please raise your hand in the room, online, we can't see you, but raise your hand. Have you been involved in a global partnership before? Okay, I think every single hand in the room went up. There are many different kinds of global health partnerships, and I think the diversity of those partnerships is going to come out during this session today. I think because the reality is that almost all of the outcomes that we achieve in global health are actually done through some form of partnership, including very different kinds of organizations of different sizes with very different roles, based in different parts of the world, and including people from very different worldviews and backgrounds. Okay, so one more question for those of you who were involved in a partnership before. Think of a partnership that you've been involved with, and then raise your hand if you ever observed any form of inequities or power imbalances in that partnership. Okay, pretty much every hand went up again. 150 people online. I wish I could see your hands too. Okay, so you are probably not going to be surprised by some of the conclusions of this report if you've been involved in a partnership, whether in global health or not, or in other sectors. I think the conclusions of this report, even though it's focused on global health, actually are reflective of all kinds of global partnerships that we're all involved in. As a working group, one of the things that we recognize is that there's been a lot of discussion, especially over the last few years, that there's a need for localization, locally led development, shifting power, decolonization, pick your word, pick your euphemism to describe this challenge. And we acknowledge that many of the people who work in the global community actually genuinely want to see these changes. But living this change can be really difficult in the complex and entrenched global health landscape that we all work in. There's diverse partners. Some of them are very large institutions that are difficult to change. There's funding streams that create lots of different incentives, and there's just inherent power imbalances in this global health field that we work in across the globe. So we set out to create a set of recommendations that is backed by research and evidence and examples, but really to offer practical ideas for the many well-intentioned participants in global partnerships around the world who really want to contribute to change, regardless of where they are and in the world and which kind of institution they're a part of. And I think it's important that this report also really focuses in on human behavior, because it's really humans that are parts of partnerships. And of course, we are all part of institutions and we have to respond to incentives. So that part is important. How do we reform institutions and the architecture, but it's also about us as people and how we're behaving. So I hope that you will come away inspired and with some ideas for personal action today. So with that, I am really delighted to introduce Dr. Christian Asema. And Christian is the Executive Secretary of UNAS, the Uganda National Academy of Science, and he's also the lead author of this study. And he is here to share an overview of the study and also talk a little bit about the diverse working group that was a part of this study as well. So welcome.
Great, thank you very much, Gina. It is wonderful to be here and wonderful to see those of you in the audience and those online. When I heard that we had hundreds of people registered, it it really confirmed what I suspected, that there would be interest in this work, despite DC having so many important meetings going on at the same time. So I'll start here with a story. On January 16th, 2009, I wrote Gina an email. I was just a young punk out of graduate school, looking to find my footing somewhere in DC. I met with Gina in the regional, well, one of the R4D offices with all the boxes around. And we had a great 40-minute conversation. And in that conversation, I realized I didn't know what I was talking about. And I had to go back and question my assumptions. And Gina had asked me to send her my writing samples, which I did on January 27th. She gave me feedback. And one of those writing samples was on the role of global health partnerships in strengthening African health systems. I reviewed that paper last night, and sure, it was garbage. But at least I'm maintaining interest in this field in no small part due to Gina. And soon after our meeting, I was hired, and actually by one of the people that she introduced me to. So it's wonderful to come full circle here and to do this work with our committee, with Gina, and of course with my brother Dorian. So why did we take on this work? At UNAS, there's been a lot of focus. Actually, 10 years ago, there's a report on country ownership, leading up into the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals. And Uganda was the president of the General Assembly. And so we managed to get some words in there, but still there's this lingering thought in the academy. How do we serve society better? So we focused in on partnerships in general, governance partnerships, global development partnerships, makes us do one on these global health partnerships that touch many of us. So that is how we situate it. You can ask yourself, why are we doing care and responsibility and an ethic of care and responsibility? Very much along the lines Gina described of a practice. How do you actually show, demonstrate that you care without being fake about it or getting accolades for caring? It's not a busy job. And how do you recognize certain errors made, acknowledge them, and then find a way to move forward with the lessons learned from those mistakes? Not blaming, but actually taking that ability to respond. That is that responsibility that we are talking about here. And so now it is my pleasure to move through these slides quickly, bore you a little bit, but at least we will have a foundation for our conversation later today. So can move on to the next step here, to our outline. And actually, we can even go beyond the outline. So everyone, there's the outline. You can see someone to discuss. So let's go through our process here, like any other academic, is that at first you do some consultation, which is on the next slide here. Yeah, let us advance. Yes, great. So we talk, some just quick exploration with some stakeholders. In our case, some fellows of the academy, some colleagues outside the academy, outside of Africa, and then back before you ever start. So is it going to be relevant? Will it be helpful to anyone? And so then that's why then it's like, oh, this is for practitioners who might be stuck in systems that they can't change full scale, but maybe they can change something about themselves. Because at the end of the day, it's how I make you feel, how you make me feel. And if we are actually going together, walking the walk together, we change each other and maybe we will deliver against our mission. All right? So the statement of task, that was a simple thing to come up with eventually, although of course, with all these experts, every 5 words you have to stop and revise. So after that one, convene this expert panel approved by the UNAS Council, and then we start the fun of going through all the evidence, our discussions. I can tell you, it was not a straightforward process. There were times when we almost stopped, and there were times when you could feel the emails coming through saying, hey, what's going on? Hey, you're wasting our time. What are you going to do? But it was part and parcel of the process. It was so helpful because even at the committee level, there were those very human dynamics, okay? Very human, where people would be disappointed, but not tell me. They would go tell someone else. Who would tell someone else? Then I would find out in a circular way, what did you just tell me? So working through even that kind of sequence, eventually we did, because we had to get sign off from everyone. The evidence, again, those are easy things to accept. The human dynamics of the committee, I think, was the most difficult. Then you see the evidence and say, no, something isn't quite right. So we still had to unlearn some things. There are times when you could see light bulbs going off. But we had never thought about that. And since everyone around the table was an expert, no one could say, no, my view is the correct one. It was shared learning, right? This external review process is always what I call suffering in in real time, because you get hammered away and you have to work through hundreds of comments. But again, it's to build each other. Remember the feedback I got from Gina in 2009? It built me. Same thing with this external review. It is always suffering, but the end product so much better. And then you are back to that other initial step, rethinking, revising, learning, and so on. Okay, and now we are here to circulate the findings. And this is the third such event. We did one in Dublin the beginning of October, among other things that we all do. One in Uganda at the end of October, and then this one. So we'll move on to the next slide. Okay, here are our people, and I'll show you the best slide in this deck. The next one. There you go. There's the A team. I don't know how the co-chairs were able to get everyone together and calm down the temperature many times. No. We'll get through it, be comfortable, and everyone happy at the end. So you have Doyle from Nigeria, Gina here from the United States, and then we move to the next slides very quickly. We have Bruce in the room here from the Catholic Health Association of the United States. If you are in global health and don't know Nelson Sewakambo, please get an examination because that's our global health guru, Uganda. And then you'll be hearing from this philosopher, Professor Kamara from Kenya. Then we have Tatiana from WHO in Geneva. We keep going. And then Abi from Sunway University is the provost there in Malaysia. Soledad from Chile. I'm sure many of you have met Sally Stansfield as well, who's based in US, France. But I say, Sally, you will find her on Delta Airlines. Let's move on some more. Rasigan, this is our socialized communist from South Africa. And then you have Shire in the back here, a consummate diplomat, helped us get through so many difficult moments, and then David from Ireland. That was the team. But there are so many other people that help put things together, including and live here, so we are not forgetting about you. Let us please move forward. And now, here's your visual representation. So we didn't cover everything, but we really did our best to get there. And then for the reviewers, you will see in the report itself, reviewers also came from all over the world. It was incredible. Next slide, please. And the next one here. Now I get into some of the boring stuff, but please bear with me. I'll soon be done. Conclusion one, recommendation one. This one, I'm sure you expected, okay? That the complex global health financing, that one really helps with these power imbalances. And those who are in the privileged positions don't really want to change. If you have the power, you don't want to change it. So in fact, to make the financing process even more complex, Getting a grant from WHO, you fill out a pile of paper like that. The same story with our other development partners, it's something else. You understand why they're there, but it is just it's painful, right? So what do we do here? You have your transparency, and these again practices for you. And this report is very much a conversation starter, not one that is fully prescriptive, everything. Just so let us have this conversation a bit deeper and check in with ourselves. Okay? So these constraints, how do we address them in this system? It takes all of us here, and it starts with that. Okay? We move to the next conclusion and recommendation. Yes, again, with these harmonization processes, yes, they do perpetuate the inequities as you read deeper in the report. And it is very crazy when you come to these global health relationships, as we call them. It's rare that you actually have a real conversation about where you're all coming from and what you're bringing to the table, and more importantly, what you are not bringing to the table. So if you are not bringing equity to the table, striving for it, we should talk very clearly about that. Then I know how to deal with you on those terms. Okay, and maybe if we work through that initial hurdle, we can own that process. Again, walk the journey. Yes. The next conclusion and recommendation, please. Which is the next slide. Yes. Have you all had this thing, capacity building? I hope that today is the last time you use it. Capacity building. The assumption is that there is no capacity. That kind of thing ended a long time ago. Think of it in the 1960s. There is no capacity in Asia. There is no capacity in South America. So we have to go and build it. Who is this we that actually understands what you're going to build? You don't even know the building blocks in that place. So let's move to capacity strengthening. And this is a funds of knowledge perspective that we are all bringing wisdom to the table. And that is very, very true in different, in all the contexts that we operate in. And notice that I'm not here to vilify people in the so-called global north. And for us in the global south, we are the best, perfect. No, we do things to each other that are horrible all the time. Let's look at some of our leaders. And then we do things to lift each other up as well. Same thing with our colleagues, in Europe, in Australia, in the United States. We do things to lift each other up. And many times you feel like you're being talked down to about your own country and your own situation. See, no, it's not going to work. And hopefully we can stand up more to that. Just think of capacity strengthening. When you visit Uganda, I am building, in fact, I'm strengthening your capacity to operate in that environment. Imagine how humble you become when you approach that.
Yeah.
Okay? We move on to the next conclusion and recommendation. Okay? Interconnectedness of humanity. It sounds very philosophical, but I am sure when Eunice presents, the philosophy will fall apart and say, actually, this is at the heart of everything we do in global health. Everything we do in our partnership is that you are human, I'm human, with all of my foibles and all of my gifts. I recognize you that way, recognize me in the same way. Again, one of our Nigerian professors says equity is self-interest. If I treat you as a human and you treat me as one, I've met my self-interest, which is to be received, recognized as I am and valued. Okay? And the trustworthiness you see in the recommendation, we move from trust, the abstract idea, to trustworthiness, the practice. Because you don't just develop bonds of trust out of air. What have you done that demonstrates that you are a trustworthy person? You know how many times we've overcome institutional barriers simply because someone in the institution said, you know what? These 5 steps I'm going to help you with in 5 minutes. because I know exactly what to write for them to disappear. That one, I'll say this is a person I can call when there is a problem, right? But the other person will say, yeah, those 5 steps will take you 5 months. See you there. Knowing full well in 3 minutes they can help and get rid of that hurdle. Come on. There's no trustworthiness there. And you see it, I see it when you're being given the runaround. And then we move on. Next slide, the conclusion and recommendation. Yeah, and you'll hear Bruce talk about humility. I'm sure it will also be on the same side. Again, we are talking about the open communication, including having the difficult discussions, just as we did as part of this commission. But those painful moments, not in a moment, but with 2020 hindsight, I value them very much because when we meet now, we're gonna have each other, okay? Because we made it through those tough times. Next slide, please. Yes, again with the humility. People, why are you asking us to be humble? But at some point, when you accumulate a lot of experience, you think you know everything. And sometimes when you have zero experience, like me in 2009, you also think you know everything. You got it down. There are other special people in this world. You're one of them. You're one of many, but recognize them as well. Okay, and that is that self-reflection piece. And I think I'm almost done here, Katie. In the next one. So I go back that story I started with. If Gina hadn't shown some interest in young man, I probably would have left, done some other thing. But this is a life project, this global health partnership that helped with this self-reflection and just somebody being interested. Because maybe those 40 minutes didn't mean a lot, but they changed the trajectory of my career, right? And just as far as we go with Perry, my friend back there, Dennis Owin, is in the same position I was in 2009. So if there's anyone in this room who is willing to care, there is someone there to be cared for. And I guarantee you, you will not regret it. And I'm being very serious. So that is the process. Here is where we are. It's a great honor to be here, and we'll be back in a few years when we've learned something together in this room and all those online. And remember, it's an invitation to a conversation. You're welcome.
Great to go back to 2009 and remember a little bit about those times. That was fantastic. I am now very, very pleased to introduce Doyen Odubanjo. Odubanjo, I think I got your name wrong. Who has been, I've been very privileged to get to know Doyen through this working group. And he is the executive secretary of the Nigerian Academy of Science, right? And he's gonna bring up the rest of the panel. Go ahead, Doyen.
Thank you, Gina. It's actually been my pleasure and privilege to share with Gina over the last few months. It's been a little rough, like Mr. said, but it's been a good experience altogether working with the group, getting to know all of them. And today it's my pleasure to invite them. Therefore, I'll invite those who are here first. Shali Prasad, who is the Vice President, Associate Vice President for Rural and Global Health, University of Minnesota. Also, have those to come to.
We should probably see, people can see, you might want to move that aside and then you can sit.
I'm not sure what I'll see here.
Okay, that's fine. We just need to make sure we see you from there.
Sorry, as you can tell, we're bad at formatting. Kristen and I, we worked for many years together, and we don't do well with formats. We're very badly. So Bruce Compton is here, Senior Director of Catholic Health Association of the US. Give a round of applause. Of course, our Christian, let me invite him back. Actually, we've been in many places, many projects together, and this is the most problems. Good, so our Christian and online, we have Eunice Kamara. I think not sure that she's online. Eunice is the professor of ethics and religion from my University of India. I just want to be sure she's online. If I'm able to show up.
Yeah, 1 second. Just have to have her turn.
And same with Tatiana Reyes, who's program officer for the care unit at the WHO, also online.
There we go.
Eunice and Tatiana, can you see us? Can you hear us?
Loud and clear.
Eunice, you?
Yeah, it's well received. Thank you.
Great, awesome. Good, so we have very little time, I'll have to rush them a little bit. I will start from the beginning, and I'll come from Shiny. So Shiny, how do you know this? How did you get yourself in this trouble?
The trouble started when I met Christian, but that's all last one. So I think one of the things we want to talk about is the birth of what became the advocacy for global health partnerships. And all of us have particular examples when, Christian asked, have we had problems? Yes, we've had health equity related problems in global health. Mine was very early, 30 plus years ago. I used to work in those forest stripes in southern India. And I still remember working towards getting TB elimination in tribal communities. I mean, it takes a long time. TB takes a long time. Getting the trust of communities takes a long time. Almost overnight, all the trust we built was wiped away because it's all due. I think it was from the US, I'm not sure. They told people they shouldn't be taking this deadly medications. And just one stroke, everything went away. So since that time, there's been this lingering doubt in my mind that are we really doing the right things? And also recognizing that the power structures that we have, and I come from one as part of a large university, are we really perpetuating inequities? Are we part of a colonialistic mindset of, hey, we know the answer, so we should be the bosses, right? So I thought I was alone in this, that stage of high idealism, low practicality, everybody else in the world is wrong, I'm right. But over the years, I got to a point of recognizing I'm not the only one. And one such experience was quite eye-opening. That happened in 2017 here in Washington, D.C., not far from here. That's the first time I met Bruce, actually. It was a side event at the CUGH conference, Consortium of Universities for Global Health Conference. And at that side event, there was a group put together to talk about short-term engagements in global health. And I remember feeling, oh, others have felt this too, not just academics, practitioners, NGOs, faith-based organizations, governmental organizations. So it was sort of affirming in some ways that my feeling was not alone. But what led to the subsequent outcome, I think, is very important. It's a core group of us, Bruce and I, Myron Aldring and Julie Lasker. We used to meet each other twice a month for 4+ years. We got to be very close that way. I was meeting them very often with the premise of what do we do with this? Is it enough to talk about this, or should we be talking about getting more action? The good news part of that is we were planning on creating a network, not creating a structure, but a network of like-minded, a coalition of the willing. We got a small grant from the Brochet Foundation in Geneva and wrote what then became the Brochet Declaration. In the meanwhile, you folks probably, if you were tuning to the news, might have heard something called COVID happened. And it sort of set a lot of our conversations, even the short-term engagements in global health. Eventually, the brochure declaration, we socialized it through multiple webinars. And then gathered together at the Brochure Foundation. It's a tough task, somebody has to do it, it's a nice chalet. But that's when we met Christian, Professor Gambo, and a few others. And it became this call for us to have a little more organizational structure. A coalition of the willing is great, but a coalition can fall apart if you didn't have some kind of an organizational structure. And I distinctly remember Christian putting up his hand and saying, we are willing to take over the organizing function around it. And the Uganda National Academy of Sciences became the secretariat of AGHP, Advocacy for Global Health Partnerships. That's been a growing relationship, a lot more grown sometimes than the growing has happened otherwise. And it's been a really fruitful partnership for us to ask the question, how do we then grow this network where there is equal representation, good representation, equal probably is the wrong word, of voices around the world. Today, AGHP is, again, still a coalition of the willing. We have a steering governing committee that is running most of the activities of it. And in this process, coming back to your original question, Doyle, we commissioned this study. And this study, the consensus study that we've been talking about, was commissioned by AGHP. And I got to tell you that besides organizational structure, it's been a really good learning experience for me to be part of the trials and tribulations of creating and the speed in which it's created. I come from academia, things move at the speed of snails. Right? For us to write a paper takes 3 years sometimes. So have a consensus study after less than a year has been amazing. And I think it has been intense. I think it's been very crisp. I feel that you'll all resonate with the points here. Over to you.
Thank you, Shai. Now, we had Christian speak about the recommendations and talk about global partnerships. And one of the first institutions we all think about is WHO. So Tatiana, how do these recommendations apply? WHO, how do you see them apply? That's the first institution everybody points their fingers at.
Thank you, Doreen. And very nice to see you all on the other side of my screen. And I'm really sad not to be there in person, but my heart is with you, with all of you, and really greetings to all the audience that is attending this webinar. It's a privilege for me to speak about the relevance of the recommendations of coming from the Enacting and Ethic of Care and Responsibility in Global Health Partnerships report, and how they align with the World Health Organization's work on partnerships. I've been leading the Twinning Partnerships for Improvement initiative of WHO for the past 10 years. And the first thing that comes to my mind is relationships building as a first step to establish any partnership. And I'm telling you that this discussion is not just theoretical, it is about transforming how we approach collaboration by fostering relationships rooted in trust, shared purpose, and mutual growth. At its core, the report challenges us to shift our mindset. It asks us to move beyond transactional partnerships driven by donors' agendas, efficiency, or short-term goals, and invites us to adopt a relational approach that emphasizes trust, compassion, and shared decision-making, and obviously accountability as a result. Let's begin with trust. For me, trust is not merely an ideal, but a foundation for effective partnerships. Without it, global norms, no matter how well designed, fail to resonate or inspire action. And building trust requires intentionality, listening to one another. And when I say listening, it's really active listening. Listening not only with our ears, but also with our heart. Valuing diverse perspectives and investing in relationships over time. Yes, investing in relationships, engaging with our partners is a process that takes time, because for building solid relationships, we need to have conversations and discussions. We need to challenge each other. We need to deconstruct, to reconstruct. And only when we go through this process, we start to build relationships and the foundation for trust. For WHO, this means approaching partnerships not as a means to an end, but as an opportunity to co-create solutions with the stakeholders across sectors and borders. And I think it's fundamental to embrace the process and even enjoy the process. And I know that some of our colleagues will laugh about it and had hard times to embrace the process and to enjoy it. But I think it's, for me, it has been fundamental in all the pieces of work I've been doing. So the report also invites us to rethink capacity building, as Christian mentioned, shifting from traditional approaches to capacity strengthening. And this entails prioritizing local ownership and multi-directional knowledge exchange. And in this, WHO recognizes that the expertise within communities is invaluable. And we must create partnerships where learning flows in all directions, dismantling outdated notions of a hierarchy in knowledge sharing. Another critical recommendation is the recognition of mutuality and shared ownership. And true partnerships treat all parties as equals, acknowledging that every contributor brings unique expertise and value. In our work of twinning partnerships, for example, we try our best to ensure that our norms are implemented not as a mandate, but as a co-created strategy that resonated with a local context. In my experience of establishing partnerships, we don't call a partnership between X and Y institution until we don't come together, sit at the same table, and start the conversations about what we want to do together and how we are going to walk together in this journey. So I think that to put these recommendations into practice, we must prioritize relationships as the central focus of our work, because it's just the first step. It's like a car. If you don't turn on the engine, you cannot move. So as a first step, I think it's foundational and it's important. So relationships are not just enablers of outcomes, they are outcomes in themselves. When trust and mutual respect are present, the space for innovation expands because we have the freedom to be who we are and express ourselves freely. Ultimately, the ethic of care and responsibility invites us to see partnerships as more than structures and agreements. They are dynamic, living relationships that require continuous cultivation because they are made of people and for people. Just as the report emphasizes, partnerships flourish when grounded in purpose and compassion, with a commitment to mutual learning and growth. And just to conclude, I would say that the recommendations in this report are not just relevant, they are transformative. By investing in relationships and building trust, we can turn shared goals into shared successes. And as Christian mentioned, this is an invitation to reflect. We need to be reflective in the work that we are doing and challenge each other every day, because every day is an opportunity to learn and to grow. And as a partners, it's the same. So thank you very much for the opportunity, Doin.
Thank you, Tatiana, thank you. Again, moving on quickly.
Sorry, just one note for the panelists in person. Can you guys project to the back of the room? We're having some issues with the online audio. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Tatiana. But that takes us to groups. And I think when Christian was presenting, the talk about humility kind of caught all of us. You know, there was a bit of that relevant to everybody. But I wanted to hear from groups, you know, and his own lesson in that regard. You can do that in what, 3 minutes?
Thanks, Joanne. At least I don't have to follow Eunice this time. So 3 minutes is not hard. If I had to write my story right now about global health, it would be called From Parachutes to Paradigm Shifts. I started my career in global health on a mission trip with the Catholic Diocese of Springfield in Illinois, where we literally parachuted into Haiti. We thought we were gonna have to take motorbikes through the jungle to get to the place because the roads were closed down. And I was a stockbroker at the time, and I saw the disparity, and I was well-educated and young and probably not quite so humble as I needed to be. And I saw the disparity and I said, you know what, I help people make money, but I can help people in a different way. And I went to work and developed a short-term engagement partnership between the diocese and a health facility that was funded by USAID in Haiti. We started taking regular trips and we parachuted in regularly. And we took a lot of stuff because they said we need everything. We didn't ask any other questions. We just came home and talked to vendors and got everything they would give us. And I led trips, 13 trips over the next 4 years to that place. I was then asked to get back into a more reasonable work environment where they asked me to come and work at the foundation, at the clinic where I was to be in charge of their financial reports to USAID and others and to all the funders. And it was there that I figured out we were truly parachuting in and had no idea what we were doing. I uncovered many of the things we had carried down there throughout the years, sitting in storage that were never going to be useful. But I also begun to see how that was just one example of us. I then was working with all of the foundations and the development partners, bilateral, multilateral, Christian foundations that were providing funding. And oftentimes those funding mechanisms had the same problems that we had as an organization that was just parachuting in. They were funding their priority and they weren't asking us questions. We were actually getting data from our 40 health agents that lived in the communities, but that was the data we were using. And then we were trying to, money is fungible. We were trying to take some of this funding from over here and fix the real problem while we actually address this problem. And over the last I moved home after 2 years. I watched the people running that clinic continue to receive what I believe was junk. I mean, I can give you one great example of junk. I also helped clear all the customs. And one time we received 50 buckets that had originally had donut dough in them from an organization in Canada. And they hadn't cleaned them out before they put them into a container to send them to us. When we opened that container, it was awful. But I've spent the last 25 years of my life coming home from Haiti and trying to create an environment where we change those realities. And this document, I think, is a real point in time where I feel like we are at the cusp of something real. I'll just say one last thing, Doyen, and that is Shiley wasn't just a little skeptical when he came to that meeting in 2017. His first statement was, I'm not sure we should even be here talking about it. Because I'm not sure short-term engagement need to be happening at all. They're important. It changed my life. It made me the person that I am today to be able to do this work. But man, do we need to rethink how we do all of these kinds of partnerships. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you. Now we have Eunice, and she has that incredible ability to make simple things complex and that's quite simple, you know. But that's a background. That's a skill, experience, and knowledge, and she's going to help us in just 3 minutes, Eunice. You know, how do we make that personal transformation, you know, to get to this place of equity, global, and partnerships? How do we do this?
Thank you, Diane. And I must say I'm very excited to be here. It's a great privilege for me. So thank you to everyone who's made this possible. And I'm just going to talk about moving beyond equity to justice, and beyond justice to love at all levels, personal levels, institutional levels, national levels, at whatever level you can think about. So I don't know whether I'll share the slides or somebody will share them from that end. Leif?
Go ahead and share from your end, Eunice.
Okay.
Eunice, with the slides, will you be able to do this in 3 minutes?
We're okay.
I know that's that's why I was hoping. Okay. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. So we are talking about moving beyond equality to equity and beyond equity to justice and love in global health partnerships as we launch this consensus report. As I was thinking about this, I came across some pictures online and I thought, why reinvent the wheel? I can use them to get us to understand the need for loving global relationships, particularly in health. So this is a picture of, let's assume an apple tree, and this apple tree represents the earth, and the fruits from the apple tree represent the earth's resources. In this context, health resources. But this is a situation of inequality because we see there are two people down here, one on the right, one on the left. If we wish, we can think of them as the global north and the global south. And please remember that when we speak about the global north and the global south, we are not necessarily talking about geographic settings. We could as well be having global north and global south in the south, for example, in Africa. Even in our own families, we may have global north and global south. So this is a call for individual reflection on the partnerships that we have, because then those may as well be determining the bigger global partnerships that we are talking about. So in this situation, we have inequality where there is unequal access to opportunities. This guy here has the fruits falling on his side, but there's no fruit falling on this side. This is inequality. We would definitely not want inequality. We would want to have equality. And when we have equality, everybody has equal access in terms of tools to assist them to get to the resources of the earth. But then, as you can see, this guy to the right is still not able to access the resources, not as well as the guy on the left, even though everything they have in terms of tools has been made the same. Sometimes equality can help, but more often than not, it doesn't address some of the situations that need to be addressed. So then we move to equity. We're talking about equitable global health partnerships. Here we are saying we give according to need. We identify the needs and then we address them, and we customize the tool to address the needs of individual person. But as you can see, even though this guy to the right has a longer ladder, he still is not able to access resources as much as this guy is able to. So we are saying equity is not always the solution. It doesn't give us a win-win situation, because the challenge is not so much about the height of these guys as about systemic problems. It's about the system. The system has a problem. It's leaning towards a certain direction, and in the process, the resources more easily fall towards a certain direction. So we say, why not move to justice, where we try to address the system? Systemic issues may be addressed, but then addressing systematic issues within systems may be very difficult, may be very expensive, and actually may be unnecessary. Relationships don't operate on justice. Healthy relationships do not operate on justice. You cannot put laws on how people relate. So we need to be thinking beyond putting structures to deal with systemic injustice. If you notice in this picture, there's no wall between this guy and this guy. There's no physical wall, so to speak. So why can't these guys pick the fruits and then share and forget about putting so many resources on propping this tree? There's no barrier, but I argue that there is a barrier which is invisible, and the barrier is power. Power makes it impossible for this relationship to thrive for both of them, where they are able to care and share for each other. And therefore, I propose that we move beyond equality, beyond equity, and beyond justice to love. And what does this entail? This entails a mindset shift. We need to shift in terms of how we think and embrace the understanding that humans are interconnected by design. It is not by chance that not just humans, but all creation are interconnected. And therefore we thrive together or we perish together. We also need to appreciate that all humans own the earth the way we try to understand it. But in actual fact, all humans belong to the earth. None of us is going to outlive the earth. The earth will outlive all of us. So we belong to the earth. If we realize this, we will begin to see that power disconnects, but love connects. Love makes us interconnect and then look out for each other. And therefore, this calls for a move to sharing and trusting. And this is why the consensus report on care and responsibility is very is being launched at a very appropriate time. We appreciate it as a call to love. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eunice. I think you see why, and some of those concepts you have to think about them again and again and again. But I think I want to thank all the panelists for the comments. I wish there was a lot more time to think about the things they were saying, because there's some depth to some of those stories that this morning. However, working, with Gina to drive this book was quite some work, outside of our day jobs, and the big question will be, what exactly do you think? Right order. So what do we hope will change? What we want to see? Snap your finger and things happen. What would you like to see changes? And Kristen, that starts with you. You are the one who put all of us through this. So why what do you think or what you hope would make the difference, from this work?
From the work. Well, earlier on, we talked about all these recommendations really taking shape, starting with you. With that. So I'll give what I hope for myself, and that is to evolved to the point where I can truly love those that we call the funders. Serious. Yeah. Because it's very easy to hammer them. Development partners, we call them dangerous partners. That's a very easy place to be. And I struggle with funders. I'm sure most of you do who work in a world where you need to, many times you feel like you're begging. You're really begging, and the one giving actually has a lot more. But they just don't want to do it because why build your institution? You know, you're challenging me too much, or I'm not seeing your relevance. So when UNIS challenges us to love, that's my 2025 thing to do. Approach those of our friends who mean well and try to understand them some more, the way I come from. So that is my inner work. It's going to take time. It will be painful, but there are things to go through. And who knows what will come out of it. Because there are really those funders who want to do good, who want to care and be responsible, and just have to open up and see what's going on. On the institutional side, you notice this report has a forward from our Minister of Health. And that didn't happen by accident, because before this report, there was a colloquium in Geneva hosted by Gavi in 2023, last year, May. And from that colloquium, the Minister of Health was there. She gave a keynote address, and she supported this work ever since. So on the institution side, again, it's going out and really finding some of these evidence champions that seem out of reach, but we can reach them when we, again, this power thing, we all have it. And I think less and less we move away from the power to say no, which is typically my approach. That let's get a movement together, all say no to the donor, and all say no to these policymakers. But as I've evolved with this study, I think it is that power to say yes and approach them. Because when you see a Minister of Health supporting this kind of work, which may not necessarily align with our political interests, things are moving. They might not be seismic changes, but add them all up. What can move in here? What can move in London? What can move in Kuala Lumpur? What can move combined together? I think again we come back to that, showing the care and responsibility and to love our earth and ourselves. Those are the two things.
Great question. I will go online. Kachana, 1 minute. What would you like to see change?
Oh, so many things. No, yeah, I really hope this report catalyzes a profound shift in how global health partnerships operate, moving away from transactional top-down models toward relationships built on trust, mutual respect, and shared ownership. I think that by embedding the principles outlined in the report, such as transparency in funding, embracing diverse perspectives, and fostering humility, we can create, or we can start to create a more equitable and inclusive global health ecosystem. And probably it's too ambitious from my side, but I really envision a future where trust is foundational and partnerships are grounded in open communication, mutual understanding, enabling meaningful collaboration across diverse stakeholders, a future where local voices lead, because communities have a greater ownership of strategies and decisions, ensuring that solutions are contextually relevant and sustainable. Also, to see power dynamics more that are balanced, not more balanced, but are really balanced. Because yeah, in global health partnerships, not seeing these global health partnerships characterized by hierarchical structures, but instead by shared decision making, flat entities in which we allow multi-directional learning and also co-creation, really co-creation. So start from scratch with the partners and come with solutions or initiatives, whatever we want to put together, that it fits the purpose of the persons that we are serving. And ultimately, I hope this report inspires organizations and individuals to adopt a mindset of care, responsibility, equity, and love. And I really concur with you, Eunice. Let's move and let's dare to talk about relationships. Let's talk about compassion. Let's talk about love, because we don't dare to talk about these kind of things. And I think that this is what is going to transform the way we work together, because we see love or compassion as feelings and not as a mean or as a way of working. And I think that we can start with simple things like that in our own context. And I think that this is what we went through when we came together, different people from different nationalities, from different perspectives and backgrounds, together to develop these consensus studies. And for me, it has been really a beautiful experience, and hopefully a lot of people can go through this kind of experiences. Thank you, Doyin.
Thank you. We're out of time. But incidentally, one of my favorite stories comes from the beauty. One of the subsidiaries there, and I pushed a proposal for just over $200,000. And the CEO writes me back and says, Tony, if you can bring this to below 200,000, I'll approve it now. That's my limit. So if it goes above it, keep it as it is, it's okay. But I'll have to pass it through the board. That will take a few weeks to a few months, I don't know. But if you can, then I'll do it. And I just called my team, I said, get it down now. And it was done that night. I sent it back in, approved immediately. And I thought that was transparency, that kind of thing to say, look, no need to give you a runaround. This is good, we'll approve, but just about $3,000 above my limits. So there we go. Yes, so I think I should just thank the rest. Back,
Right. One more, thanks, guys. Right, well, that was very thought-provoking and inspirational, I think, so really appreciate all of those remarks. I'd now like to invite our next panel up. This is actually going to be a group of leaders from global health institutions based here in Washington. We'll see if they have the same perspectives or slightly different. So let's see, I'm going to come sit up here, and we've got Carl Hoffman, the CEO of Population Services International, PSI. We've got Josephine, also known as Josie Anza, who is a localization advisor in the USAID Bureau for Global Health. And we've got Juan Pablo Uribe, the Global Director of Health, Nutrition, and Population at the World Bank, and Elisha Dunn Giorgio, who is the CEO of the Global Health Council. So lots of inspiration from the last panel. I know that probably we're in the institutions that we're all in, we probably don't talk about love all the time. So thank you, Eunice. Okay, well, maybe at PSI, you guys do that. So much fodder for discussion here, but I thought maybe the way we would start this panel is to really think a little bit about how each of your institutions thinks about this concept of equity in partnerships. And so if it's okay, I'd love to go to Josie first, because I think you represent, it's a tie between which is the biggest sort of World Bank, USAID, we talked about funders earlier, but maybe starting with USAID. I know this, especially in this last administration, there's been a lot of focus on localization, which is kind of code for some of the things that we've been talking about here. So tell us a little bit more about what's been going on at USAID, what's working, what might, be able to work a little bit better too.
Thank you. And first off, I just wanted to first express just my joy and appreciation in being here today with you all. I really needed this energy this week and just really thrilled to be able to share this space with you all. So thank you to Gina and to earlier facilitators for having me join this panel. What I so appreciated about this study is that relational aspect to advancing and promoting equity within partnerships. Through USAID, I'm sure many of you are probably, if not all of you are probably familiar with USAID's localization vision and approach. And even prior to that, it's had multiple kind of names and frames over the years. So the work kind of continued and now it's localization, but that whole, a lot of the themes resonate in terms of shifting power to local partners, shifting power to sub-recipients, amplifying local leadership and voice and research and expertise. So these are, to me, inherently equity strategies. And so that's something that the agency, USAID, is very committed to doing and advancing and pursuing. And so part of that too is determining ways to make it easier to engage with USAID in terms of access to resources, in terms of translation services for materials, in terms of listening tours. I was just in Thailand and suffering from a little jet lag, but I was just in Bangkok for a localization meeting and around so that we can get a better sense from our partners, particularly our teams in different countries. A similar meeting was held in Ghana recently, in South Africa, similar to this, to try to understand where are the strengths, what are the opportunities, what are the needs. So listening is a big part of our strategy as well. And we know that we can also do better. So again, a lot of the things that we're looking at are those barriers to entry. And then once you do enter, not being overly burdened by a lot of the reporting requirements, which is something that we often hear as well. As someone said last week, looking at what has historically been done in terms of reporting and determining what's really needed versus we just keep doing things because we historically have done them. So that was a big thing. And then last week, actually, someone also mentioned a theme that's very relevant to what we're talking about today in terms of aside from all the things, all the indicators and the reports and the data and the this and the that, how do we center humanity in the way we implement programs and the way we relate to each other? So all this is just happening at such an amazing time. So just know that these conversations are happening. And we also realize that it's an evolution and that we still have a lot to learn and unlearn and reflect about and change around. So, but just know that the agency is definitely committed to continuing to advance this particular priority.
Thank you so much, Josie. And I think it is interesting, we talked about kind of the institutional environment and funding flows and all those things that create all these incentives that sometimes lead to power imbalances. And so USAID as an institution recognizes that you are one of the institutions that creates that environment. And I appreciate that the agency is trying to figure out how to shift. Just a quick follow-up. So this idea of like passion and love, and you mentioned a little bit about the human side. Like I was in this room recently with actually your administrator, Power, and there's a lot of discussion about kind of how to get more funding to local organizations and thinking about the sort of hard, money and all the institutional structures. Do you think that this concept of compassion and love and humility and these things are resonate at all in USAID, and it could be something that could be talked about inside the halls of
the halls. I definitely think, absolutely, I definitely think these concepts resonate. I do think we need to talk about it more. I have the privilege of working alongside a foreign service national. Actually, she's from Cote d'Ivoire. We're hosting a fellowship. And actually, this is the last week, so she's leaving. She was with us for 8 weeks. And part of what we talk about often is the story. So beyond the indicators, what is the story of localization? So in terms of telling that story as it relates to the social, economic, local, political context and how that impacts implementation and those relational aspects. So we don't talk about that enough. And so that's gonna be one of my charges leaving here in terms of how do I then infuse this throughout the agency, particularly in my role as a localization advisor in the front office of global health. So I definitely think that we can do more as it relates to that. We recognize the value of amplifying local context and local voice. And we're very vocal about that, but what does that mean? And so in real practical terms, and I think promoting those relational pieces is one strategy to do that.
Thank you so much, Josie. So now I'd like to go to Juan Pablo, the other really large global development institution here in Washington. And I know, Juan Pablo, you're part of many partnerships. I've actually sat in rooms with you in a number of partnerships. Tell us a little bit more about this from the World Bank's perspective. How are you working to try to achieve more equity? What's going well? What's not going well?
I thought you were gonna ask me about love and compassion.
Yeah.
I can't already address that. So first, thanks so much for inviting us, Gina. And I just wanted to start by saying that all what I've heard and all what you've been working during these years is absolutely important. It's completely relevant, and I would encourage you to keep pushing and insisting in this conversation and in a way advocating for much more humanism, respect, and trust in the global and regional public health architecture. So 100% with you. At the bank, I would say that positive starting point is that, and you may have heard it in the last months, I hope you also believe it, is that there's a recognition that the needs in global, regional, and country public health exceed by far all the resources, all the competency, all the knowledge of all our institutions. I would dare to say added together, much more left, each one of them alone. So there has to be a recognition of being humble with the objectives that we're all trying to pursue, and in particular, the equity purpose at the end of that objective. A second important starting point, I would say, is, again, if the needs are so big and no other entity can do it, no entity can do it by itself, is that cooperation and collaboration is a must. It's not something that you choose, it's something that you have to pursue if you really are serious about achieving the end result. If it's not about you, about your ego, about your positioning, but about the result there, then the consequence is that you need to work together. And third, I would say, the World Bank country model, Gina, you know it very well, is fully country owned. People forget that. But the money envelope of the bank does not sit in Washington. It sits in each country. And it's determined in its application in each country. I think this is very important, and we need to keep it in mind, and we need to work with that structure, which I think is the correct one. Of course, I'm interested because I come from the South, I come from a receiving country, and I strongly believe that country leadership should guide us. Now, quickly, when we see in what I found coming from, again, from the South to the public health arena, it's a very complicated context. I want to be very frank about it, because all what we got here is correct, but all of our actions out there are so different from what we're talking here. And there's such a big gap in reality between what we praise and advocate for and how we act and behave at the end of the day. That's a huge gap. We're all responsible for it. I'm included there, of course. So it's a context of fragmentation. It's a context where we all advocate together for the same cause, but then we pursue different results through different ways. I get confused, very confused. we create through partnerships, new partnerships that become organisms in themselves. And then we need to learn how to partner with the partnerships that we create. And this is very complicated, because behind those partnerships that we created, a new political economy is formed. And we need to negotiate them with a new political economy. I would strongly advise, stop this craziness. In order to partner, let's create a third party that will take away our responsibility to partner. It's madness in itself. And finally, there's a problem in the bank that I'll be very frank about. It's what I felt 4 years in this role. It's that you approach me because you think that I have money. So we're distorted in the beginning of this conversation. Imagine you're trying to fall in love with somebody and to be loved by somebody, and all what they see in you is money. Frustrating, at least for me. And I will come back to that with your second question. Let me conclude. What do we try to do in the meantime? But I will also give a couple of very, let's say, humble and simple ideas on how to correct the norm in this. But we try to have a strategy around partnerships. We don't partner for partners. So we try to partner again to secure better health outcomes with equity at the country level, which is what the bank should be working on. And in doing that, we try to align really priorities and purposes, and to come in as strong partners. It's not easy. The bank is not always seen as the most humble and easy to work partner. We may seem arrogant, we may be arrogant, we may be very stiff and rigid, and probably we are, but we're conscious about it. So just to conclude there, we talk a lot inside the bank about changing incentives for country teams to be better partners at the country level, and that's an important part. But I would insist that in our institution, like in many other institutions here represented, the most important change has to come from leadership shaping culture. And it's leadership on a day-to-day basis that shapes the organizational cultures. And it's a culture of respect, of humility, of sincerity, of being spontaneous, the only one that will lead to that organization to be an effective partner around these purposes. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Juan Pablo. You made so many different important points there. One I just want to call out is the sort of the why of partnerships, like being really clear on why we're creating them, what the purpose is. Sometimes we create things that we actually were involved in sunsetting a partnership, which was actually kind of a big deal after it had actually accomplished a lot. And sometimes you do need to sunset things and then move on and do. But once you've created an institution that wants to be there and gets money, et cetera, it's hard to move on. So I think that's really important. And then I think this concept of setting the leadership, setting the tone for the culture and trying to create the conditions for all the things we've been talking about here, the trust and the communication and all of that. So thank you for all of that, Juan Pablo. So I'm going to turn to Carl now, who is the CEO of a prominent international NGO that happens to be right across the street from us here. And I'm curious to hear from your perspective, kind of operating in this environment that is in some ways created by these larger financing institutions. How are you experiencing partnerships, equity, and what, from your perspective, what are the issues here?
Thank you, Gina, and so much wisdom already. And I do want to also congratulate the members of the authors of the reports and everybody who spoke before us, because it was inspiring, and I'm sure it was a fascinating process to get to this point, and hopefully it's not over. I found myself, before I answer your question, I will say, with reading this, digesting it a little bit, I found myself thinking more about my marriage. Because as many of you pointed out, these are human capacities and skills that we all have to build, that we develop over time. They relate to our personal relationships as much as they do ultimately to our institutional relationships. And so in that sense, I think these are really profound partnerships, right? They go deep to the heart of who we are as people. And that point was made already. Operating not as one of the big institutions of USAID and the World Bank. And by the way, I should say, Josie, I remember on the topic of partnering in the Raj Shah era, when USAID came up with a new mission statement. The first two words of that mission statement were "we partner." we partner to do many other things, but partnering is centered to the work of all the institutions that we talked about here and the so-called implementing infrastructure that an organization like PSI represents. And partnering is very hard. It is very hard for all the reasons that are talked about in this report and all the other experiences that many of us have. And then we face the reality, right? The reality is, it's touched on in the report, but I think only lightly. And that reality is the truth of power and the truth of money, as Juan Pablo talked about. I mean, we like you, Juan Pablo, not because of your money, but many of you, many people might.
The money helps.
Yeah, the money doesn't hurt. The money doesn't hurt. Money just introduces a very profound and real and unavoidable power dynamic to all relationships. And although it would be great if the partnering that occurs in the global health landscape was love-based and sort of powered by trust, the reality is that it's money that underlies a lot of it, almost all of it. And that comes with agendas, and that comes with political realities. The context is mentioned as an important piece of how we show up in partnerships. Context in this country, where a lot of resourcing emanates for the work that happens in public health, is a reality with which we must live. And there's a new political reality coming into Washington that will change a lot of the ways in which we think about these partnerships. We just have to recognize that truth. And so much as we would like to sweep away the sort of transactional partnering that feels diminishing to many of us, it's probably with us for a long time. So we have to think about how to deal with that reality and make it better than it could be. And I think this report identifies a lot of different ways in which you can do that. Maybe just one other word about language. I think the language points are super important. Even global health, to me, I try not to even use the term global health anymore, because of all the baggage that implies. Right? When people ask me, what do you do? I try and say I run a health nonprofit. I think is what it is. It happens to work in the majority world or the global south, but it's I would rather not have the baggage of global health associated with that. There's so many other ways in which language is critical to framing our challenges. And I think it's right that the report called for that. I'm not sure if we have the right, maybe that's a journey we're all on. There's no right answer to the language question. We just have to deal with it. So I'm not sure that answers your question, but just as a node that operates in this ecosystem, think about power, think about relationships, try and use them responsibly to achieve outcomes that we're all working for. And I don't think we can sweep any of those truths away. So we have to think about how we use these.
Great, thank you so much, Carl, and thank you for bringing the reality word into all of this. I think it's important to remember that we are all operating in a lot of realities, and those realities are shifting right now as we speak. And you and I, we run similar kinds of organizations, so I resonate with a lot of what you said. We actually at R4D started a number of years ago, really thinking about how we do partnerships, and we had maybe a little bit of naivete, and initially we thought a lot about how can we enter partnerships by creating shared values and really try to operate partnerships along those lines. And I think we've had a lot of successes, but we still run into challenges with partners, and they don't always work as well as you'd like them to, even when you start with those values and the trust and the communication. And so we're actually just starting another initiative right now where we're trying to revisit our partnerships and really think about how do we truly co-create with our partners at the outset, and how do we also manage partnerships collaboratively. And I think some of the things in this report have been really valuable, just thinking about what biases are we coming in with that might feel invisible. How do we really create trust, et cetera? So, but within that reality, how also, I think another point that's raised in this report is how do we be very transparent about those kind of financial incentives? Sometimes it's running under an undercurrent, but naming it and talking about it and being clear, like this is the incentive of our organization, what's the incentive of your organization? Let's put that out on the table rather than having it be a recurrent that kind of builds trust. So similar there. So I want to come finally to Elisha, who runs a slightly different kind of global health organization, which represents many organizations. Probably some of you that are in this room or online work with Elisha and the Global Health Council. So talk about it from your vantage point.
Thanks, Tina. It's really a pleasure to co-host this, and congratulations on the report. It's great, and equity is something that is baked into Global Health Council's work and really near and dear to us. We are a membership organization. We have about 140 organizational members from all sectors in the global health field, from all different countries, and we all work together to advance sound public health policy and sustainable resources to improve health and well-being throughout the world. So we have been around for quite a long time. Started in about 1972, shortly after USAID was started, Peace Corps was started, began with a very US-centric focus to advance US policy abroad. Founded though on this idea that we need a collective voice, right? We need a collective group advocacy together is 100 times better than advocacy alone, as all of us know. And so the term collective has always been used. How inclusive that was, I think that's up for some debate over the years. So we have evolved, of course, and the thinking around what is equity, what is equality, what's inclusivity has also evolved in this space. So I was going to actually talk not so much about the advocacy we do externally, which is vast, always pushing for better localization practices, better practices around civil society communities at the World Bank. Talking to all those funders like Christian is going to try and love in the to happen more inclusive and sustainable in their funding practices. But as a membership organization with such a diverse membership, we're a little bit of a microcosm for the partnership issues that occur in the broader global health space. And so for us, when I read the recommendations, all of those things are things we believe. And we have been trying over the past few years to really intentionally diversify Global Health Council's membership to bring in many more organizations from, we're going to call it Global South or global countries, whatever totally incorrect moniker we're going to use. That's what we've been trying to do. And so we said to ourselves, okay, we really want to center this on health equity. How do we do that? And we had internal conversations and we said, well, we don't know. So we're going to co-create, we're going to remove financial barriers, we're going to remove time zone issues, we're going to remove language barriers. We ended up inviting through an application process about 40 organizations based in Asia, Africa, Latin America, to come together in a health equity working group to co-create with us a health equity plan of work. How do we bolster this within Global Health Council? So it's co-chaired by two of the working group members, one from Jordan, one from Tanzania. It's been meeting for about a year. And you know what? It's not working as we thought it would. And I will say, we did all the things. I mean, I can go through that list of recommendations. Check. Humility, yep. Shared knowledge, yep. Power sharing, all of that. And so about halfway through, we stopped and we said to the group, like, what's wrong here? And for everyone in that group who had joined, and was really interested in the premise, which was how do we strengthen Global Health Council's capacity as well as those participating organizations to have more representation at the global policy level to better understand what US policy needs mean, what WHO policy needs mean, how that applies in the national context. Everybody was on board with that. That's what we were going to do. And what we have discovered is we're not ready to do it. We all came in with these, I think, unknown, subconscious, unconscious, whatever biases and assumptions about where each of our own capacities lie. And we had to very, humbly say, well, we really all thought, not just Global Health Council staff here in DC, but all of the groups that joined and the co-chairs, we all thought we knew what we were doing. And that piece of being able to say, we don't know is so important, and there shouldn't be any shame in saying that. I mean, everyone in this room is an expert. We're all asked to be up here because we are leaders. I know a lot. It's a pebble here compared to the amount of things I do not know. That amount of stuff could fill an infinite universe, and I will never get to the end of it. And I think that that piece is maybe easier to say or admit than going in with love. It's not exactly the same thing, but it does get you to a starting point of humility. I don't know. So let's figure it out together. So now just for this group, like we're rethinking it. We're working together to come up with a different way to do it. Everyone is still very committed to advancing this agenda and creating more equitable partnerships within the Global Health Council community, in addition to continuing to advocate externally for better health equity. But we stumbled and now we're fixing it. And I think that that's the other piece of this is it's not enter with humility, enter to learn, enter with open communication. It's anyone do that every time we engage in a partnership. Every interaction with your partner requires all of those things. And I mean, that has been it's a journey.
Thank you, Elisha. That is really profound. I think you illustrated a couple things, like the work we're doing is hard, right? Trying to ensure high quality healthcare and good health outcomes and well-being for 8 billion people on the planet. That's really, really hard. All of our institutions are trying to get there, and all the countries, the governments that we work with. And then these partnerships are inherently hard. And so I think part of what I take away from this is both going in with humility. A number of people have mentioned that. We don't have all the answers. And then this concept of learning, like at R4D, we call it the pause and learn, which seems kind of basic, but it's actually really powerful to be able to just say, okay, wait a second, let's all pause. It's really especially helpful in a group of people where let's pause and reflect and learn, and then let's change and continue to adapt as we go forward. And that sounds like exactly what you guys have been doing. I think it's forward. So, I want to do one quick more round with the panel, and I'm going to ask them a question. I'm also looking at the audience in case there's anyone that has something burning they would like to share. And the question is, what would you like to see change as a result of this report, including, and you can answer also, what would you like to do better as an individual or within your institution? And also ask the audience, I don't think we have a capacity to ask that of the folks online and hear them, but feel free to put your ideas in the chat as well about what you would like to see change, what you might want to do for yourself or your institution. And I think it's okay, I'll just go down the panel. Carl, do you want to start us off with that?
Yeah, I think, so listening has come up several times as when we talk about, and we all know it's really, really hard to do that. And I would give that same answer to both sides of that question. I think if the sort of the funding institutions really could live out that value of listening, or you can frame it as co-creation or being humble or sort of being open-minded about a solution that might be different from the entry point, that would lead to better outcomes over time in the space in which we all work. And then, it's both a personal and an institutional challenge to keep true to the need to deeply listen. I mean, we see that as part of our foundational part of our business model as a social marketing organization. We have to start by listening to consumers in the world and build solutions around them. And all of us, I think, come to development work in a similar way. But it's super hard. It's super hard. So as a way that we execute our work, as a way that we want to live out within our own institution, and as a way that we like to have relationships with funders, what I would love to change is better listening.
Fantastic. Okay, better listening. Thank you so much, Carl. Josie, thank you for that.
I would definitely concur with those listening things. I just in terms of the institutional aspect of it, I mentioned this before in terms of that broader story I love writing and words and storytelling and just really understanding context and what that means in terms of implementation and equitable partnering. So the more, and what I'm seeing, I guess, lacking a little bit, from my position at USA, is that broader story. And so I would love for the organization to kind of invest in more of that as well. So that we can kind of understand that, how localization and partnering doesn't happen in this vacuum. It's influenced by a whole host of forces. And just that broader awareness and understanding of that, it's something I would love to see. And also, what we talked about earlier in terms of how to then embed and infuse a lot of these relational pieces within our programming and policies and processes. Some of you all, or all of you all may have seen this new 5P framework that USAID is trying to implement and to use as we continue to advance equity related work. And so it's policies, partnerships, programs, and people is another P. And so, and a lot of that obviously all makes sense because USAID invests in all those Ps. But in terms of those relational pieces related to empathy and humility and respect and trust and humanity, how much more can we kind of advance those priorities within that framework? And then for me, I may have mentioned before that my position is situated within USAID's DEIA team, which you all can imagine that name will change soon. And so, but the work will continue. Trust in me, the work will absolutely continue. So a lot of the activities that we create and implement in the agency, some of the typical things like trainings and assessments and that type of thing, but how do we, again, embed and infuse some of these relational pieces in the way we try to, because we're trying to shift the culture a bit within the agency as it relates to advancing and promoting equity. And so being able to infuse more vocally and explicitly some of the relational aspects that were described and discussed so wonderfully in the study is definitely something I would want to continue to pursue.
And I do think that these relational pieces of this are really a big contribution to the field. So it'll be great to see if those actually can get infused into USA going forward. Thank you, Josie. Elisha? Thanks.
That's good, Jessica. Carl. So I'm gonna maybe talk about the active listening and the trust component. Because I wholeheartedly agree that people need to actually listen, just say they're listening. But I think there's a secondary part of that, which is believe what someone tells you. When someone tells you what their experience is, believe it. And I can't tell you how many times I think we're all in conversations where you'll hear someone tell someone else their experience, and that person receiving that information will say, oh, that's interesting, but, right? And condition that experience. Let's stop doing that. I really hope that instead of saying, that's interesting, but people will start saying, that's interesting, why? Why is that your experience? And then take that lesson forward. And it might hurt to hear the why, right? I mean, that might really bring you humbly to your knees. You gotta hear it, and then you can move forward.
Thank you, Elisha. I feel like I've been trained that you're not supposed to say but, you're supposed to say and I kind of had like, and you see a lot of us doing that. You're thinking but and you say and, but I like the why. I'm gonna really try to infuse that into my thinking. Juan Pablo, thoughts about what can change the result of this?
So I have like 5 things quickly on my mind, and they're very basic, and I think I would start by saying that I endorse all what has been said, great comments and, additional thoughts to what we. But I would say again, in a naive and romantic way that we still need to maintain, that we need to focus really on principles and purpose, and not on financing. And I know what I'm talking about. I'm sure that financing itself, without principles and purposes, will not resolve the problems in our countries. We need the financing. Listen to me clearly, and I'm working at the world. We need the financing. but it has to follow clear purposes and principles. And I would start. The second thing is that I strongly believe, Carl, I think you made reference to this when you spoke about global, that we need to walk away from global dialogues and rhetorics and go much more to the local. This top-down approach that we've created, I think that's very good in serving itself, but not sufficiently in serving the countries. So conscious about that, be direct about it. The third thing, to be consistent with the second, is we need to strengthen the country position. And I was thinking, reading the very good summary of this incredible work, that there may be some very practical things difficult to do, but that would strengthen the country position and walk away or help walk away from these paternalistic top-down approaches that we see so many times. One of them is we need stronger political and technical leadership of the country, and it has to be consistent and permanent. So we need to help ourselves, I'm talking about the country level, in strengthening that position. And you see the countries that are doing it, then you see the results. The second one, countries need to follow that strong leadership and commitment with greater domestic resource allocations. It doesn't matter if they're not sufficient. It doesn't matter if they're very small. It will, by itself, confirm the leadership and the position, and it will earn a lot of respect. It will help the voice of the countries. You cannot walk into a discussion like this, with a 1% allocation of your public spending in health. You start weekend. I'm sorry. You start weekend. So there are things that countries can do. Third, bring CSOs, bring civil society, bring the academia, like in this space. Bring them loud and clear. I just want to mention here two models that I really believe are great for partnership and for what this research is pointing out. One, of course, is the Global Financing Facility that I love, the GFF. Anyway, I'm the director of the GFF, but I believe in it. And it's for women, adolescents, and children. It's country-owned and country-led, and with civil society and results focused. Yes, it's not perfect, but it has the right purpose and principles. The other one, and you were part of it, is the joint learning net. The young man, peer-to-peer learning. It's this respectful exchange of knowledge where I do not know everything, and I can always learn from somebody else, and we can work together around knowledge. Fourth, quickly, simplicity. There's nothing worse for a partnership. Think about a bilateral relationship with your loved one, than overcomplicating things. All these rules are followed. I'm gonna live with you forever. Part 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's make it simple. Let's make it direct. Let's make it really focus on the purpose and on achieving the results. We copy paste in the partnerships, all the wrong things, and just go around them, And you see that we copy everything from the theory of change to all the internal structures. Let's make it simple, because the problems themselves are sufficiently complicated. So let's make it simple to try to tackle the complexity out there. And last, I think we need to act much more than what we've done. I'll give you just an example. We have this nice partnership with great partners. I'm gonna just mention them. Gavi, the Global Fund, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and we're struggling supporting a country in South Asia. And letters come and go, and emails come and go, and suddenly, why don't we all meet in the same room in Islamabad, Pakistan, and we work together, whatever needs to be resolved in this partnership. Just like at home, and it worked. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Pablo. I actually was thinking a little bit back to Eunice's point too about like when she was showing the tree with the kind of, trying to change the tree, which is hard. And that's kind of like what you're getting at, where there's these complexities. You think, okay, if we're going to make this work, we have to create this super complex partnership. But if we get back to the simplicity of trust, communication, listening, being open and honest, being transparent, all of those things, maybe we need fewer of all the rules and things that get caught up in. So that was just one of the many great points she made. And does the audience, anyone in the audience, have something they'd like to share about what they would like to change or do differently? Yes. You can say your name and where you're from if you'd like.
Sure. My name is Jenny Andrew, representing Conics International. Thank you to all the panelists. This report is actually really amazing. I think my comment question is more around, this report is really a great focus for global partnerships, I think, in the global north. Great recommendations from what I've read so far. I would love to see a part 2 for local organizations on empowering them to push back. As a Haitian in this room and working in international development and traveling really all over Francophone West Africa and just working in this space, I think when you show up from an international organization like the Conics, people will listen kindly, politely. But sometimes you say things and you're like, I'm hoping for some pushback, but there's so much politeness or like, we don't want to push back because you're the funder, where they just kind of go along with whatever you're saying. And I think, and we're seeing a little bit more of that empowering in local organizations, but I would love to see some really amazing recommendations to support local organizations on how to push back to the powers that be. Because sometimes what we bring in is not necessarily what that local organization or that local community needs. And people don't want to push back because, you don't want to bite the hand that feeds you a little bit, right? So I'd love to see your organizations work more on that, but also to see something written and shared in as many languages as possible worldwide. So that's that, but also I think my question is, this is all really love, kumbaya, I love it, empathy, compassion, all the things that we should focus on, right? But there's also the reality of the finance and the reality on the ground, what we say in these rooms and what happens underground is not necessarily, they don't match. So what is your advice for organizations, especially huge organizations that answer to a USAID? You have your different indicators. When we go to countries, sometimes you're like, oh, come on, you guys are here, that's cool. PSI is also here. R4D is also here. FHI is also here, but you guys don't talk to each other. And you guys are all funding us, but we have 1,000 things to do because you all ask for different things. So what would you recommend to a local organization where that's their problem, where there's a lack of collaboration to start that empowering journey?
Thank you so much. There's a lot in what you just shared. I think both the notion of like we've heard of listening and asking why, but in order to listen, the partners have to feel comfortable talking and speaking truthfully about what they believe. And it's sometimes that might involve more invitation. So I think it's both potentially sharing ideas for partner organizations and also for powerful partners to be able to try to elicit that as well. So thank you guys. Does anyone have any quick reactions on what can be done? Or maybe we'll ponder that for a moment, or
No, it wasn't here. My own personal experience in Colombia with migrant situation from Venezuela. There was a moment where we had more than 40-something different agencies working around the same purpose and not talking to each other and really being redundant. And we didn't have that situation before, so we have never faced a problem. But if you then convey them in a unified space and force them to talk to each other and try to organize them from the government side, leading the response, I think we're helping them serve your own country much better. So I believe the country has a lot to do with that. And I know it's very difficult in many countries, and we are putting some up a very difficult situation. But the other thing is again to wait for the founders, the financiers to resolve your problems. And then to your point about this horizontal face-to-face relationship, I think starting it. Again, it's not about who has more money and more power. There has to be the same respect, but the conversation has to occur in a horizontal way. And I think our countries can do more. And it's not only the political leaders, civil society, NGOs have a great role to play.
is yes. I think so, I mean, I think that sort of the question about the pushback is, yes, you don't want to bite the hand that feeds you, but there's a trust issue, right? So you coming in, you may want to hear the pushback. Are you able, on behalf of those local partners, to take that pushback up the chain of power? Because your own power dynamic as a recipient of USAID funding or whatever funding, you don't have the power in that situation, right? So you have to then figure out how to run it up the chain internally, economics, then up to USAID. That, you know, I mean, there's a lot that's in that. And so I think it's also incumbent on those of us who are kind of traveling the country or implementing programs in countries where we don't live to really think about what's our own power in that situation and what risk are we willing to assume, both personally and organizationally.
Right.
And I think, you know, that piece about the multiple players implementing all the programs, you know, some of that is like a flaw in the system, right? Is some of it also intentional? I mean, that kind of disparity and diversion, so it really helps maintain the power imbalance. And so that's just another thing to think about. I mean, it's one, I'll just say that these points are one of the reasons why we're trying to bring more country partners from all of the countries into Global Health Council. Everyone says, oh, great, you're gonna build the capacity, strengthen capacity. We need strengthening capacity, right? All of the INGOs that sit in Global Health Council need to learn some things about how it works, and then together we can change the system. But everybody's missing some crucial knowledge. So I don't have an answer, but I'm with you. Thanks for that.
But I could just, I mean, if you look, you want to look at it from a positive angle.
Yes, please.
That's right. So, yeah, it's not, maybe not a bug, but it's a feature of the system that there are multiple organizations trying to solve big complex problems, right? Coming from different folks, and sometimes you can the same people. There is a value in a competitive approach to figure out what works. And sometimes that has to come from different people of different organizations being asked to try different things with different communities, with different countries, right? And I'm not sure that's a bad thing. It is when it's conflictual or unnecessarily combative. But the idea that, you know, we get better outcomes through competitive thinking about how to solve tough problems, we probably shouldn't shy from that. We need to figure out how to do that without unnecessary friction.
Yes.
Hello, everyone. Pardon me, my voice is a little hoarse. I'm Awele Okibo. I'm founder and CEO of Creative Advisory. We're a Nigerian-based development communication organization. And we do work with a number of you. We're local partners. We are on ground. And to piggyback on what you were saying, very valid. Sometimes it feels like we're set up for failure. However well-intentioned a lot of these organizations are, you see the intent. However, sometimes when I look at the TORs or the RFPs, I think, who wrote this? Who did we talk to on ground while the TOR was being drafted? And then we end up having to have these expectations. We have all of these measures and indicators that we have to meet. So I think it's really reverse, even when you're drafting a lot of the opportunities on your forecasts, the World Bank, RFPs, it will really help to ensure that it's fit for purpose. And that is working with people on ground to ensure that those objectives, whatever program you're working on, it's really fit for purpose. My second point, we did work with the Gates Foundation on COVID and about pushback. If you don't feel that you are empowered, you will fail. And it'll be very difficult to meet those expectations. We had to fight to get the government to work with all the faith-based organizations, bringing in the imams and the pastors in the room to help empower them to pass on messaging around the COVID vaccine. So I think it's really to all of your points listening, but empower us by bringing us in the room a little earlier. Thank you.
Very profound, very important. Any other audience members? Bruce, yes.
Just having been in Kampala and in Ireland to be at these lunches and this one, I think one of the answers to the question back here is the people in Kampala said, we need to think of ourselves as the gift to the rest of the world that we are. And I think that is part of the solution, is we need to think of them as a gift, not people are going to implement our programs for us. And I think it goes to answer both of these questions. That's what we do.
Yes.
There are actually a few questions online,
Oh,
so maybe I'll share multiple questions and folks can decide how to answer them. I think some maybe have been answered as we've gone through the day, but one that came in earlier was just in terms of restructuring the experience of partnership from the beginning, you know, what's the best way to do that to bring about, you know, the things we've talked about, trust and, you know, common goals and, you know, ensure that it's set up for success. We also have a question from someone saying, when working in partnership with governments, we also need to take into account the relationships that those governments have with their people. We may need to work with some populations who are discriminated against, neglected, or stigmatized. How do you suggest we negotiate these issues in a practical way? And then a question here also says, it is admirable and important that donors are emphasizing and prioritizing locally led partnerships. But as we have heard, even the most thoughtful effort can fail. What is the best role for donors in driving a localization agenda?
Thank you. We probably don't have time in the next 2 minutes to answer all of those absolutely excellent questions. But Juan Pablo, do you have a thought? And I want Josie to.
Yes, no, I mean, right away. I don't have an answer, but I do. I would love to. And again, it's very similar like in a couple's relationship, learning from others, belong to another generation. But there's right now, I won't maintain the names private, but we're going into an important, let's say, objective with another organization. You have a shared purpose, and the default is we need to do an MOU, and it has to have all these conditions, and now I'm scared. No, I just want to work with you in the same purpose. So why don't we start there? With no condition. Without condition. We see if we like each other. And maybe then I'll sign a one-pager. Organization, we gotta have fewer lawyers. Why bring in legal? Why bring in all these anyway? That will put us farther away from the purpose. Why don't we start working together, acting, doing it, and then we see how we make it more permanent. That's what I talk about, simplicity and purpose first. And it's so difficult. Look, the answer on the other side, brilliant, technical, great colleagues. What? About an MOU? Can that be done? Of course, it can be done.
Thank you. Many questions.
Right. No, I wanted to just briefly say, because I know we're at time, and in relation to your question as well, in terms of a lot of the things around co-creation from the beginning and then throughout, and that's something that USA now is exploring and actually doing in a lot of cases. Like, we're trying to allow for concept notes and verbal delivery of proposals, as opposed to, you know, this long written response to, I agree with you, these overly complicated notice of funding opportunities, and just how best to kind of co-design and co-create from the beginning, with the activity design, through the monitoring and evaluation and learning, and then throughout the process. So not just at one point, but throughout the life of that project. So these, and we're hearing this too amongst our partners and our colleagues in country. So just know that we are constantly grappling, but in a good way, like learning and changing and adapting as we continue to evolve. Because as everyone raised there, it is hard, but the commitment is there, and I definitely believe that. So I just want to thank you for your question and for your questions and comments.
Thank you, yes, and just to respond to one of those questions that we heard from online, I think this question about governments listening to voices in their countries, I think we talked about this in the working group, that there are a lot of power dynamics within countries, of course, and then there's also the added layer of the power dynamics across the globe. And I think we've been thinking a lot at R4D, how do we try to help facilitate better engagement within countries? So you get the right people at the table, so you get the right answers to solutions, and that you're also responding to the needs, including of people that have been traditionally marginalized. And you get more buy-in, and it's actually more effective. You get better outcomes if all of the right voices are at the table and really partnering. But it's hard, it's not easy, and especially if you're an external partner, kind of trying to help facilitate that. You know, I know for sure that when I walk into Nigeria, I know nothing about the dynamics, and I'm trying to figure out, like, is there any way I could be helpful, or do I just need to stand back? So I think that's another part of the complexity of all of this. But I just want to thank everyone for being here today. Thank this panel. Thank the previous panel. This from around the world. So everyone that was involved in putting this together, I really, really appreciate it. I think it's the beginning or maybe the middle of a conversation. It started before, and now we're continuing to discuss it. I hope this will not be the end, and I hope we all come away inspired to do something a little different. So thank you again. Hi.